The analysis section of MapMate allows you to run a wide variety of different queries to look at your data in different ways. However, you can actually do quite a lot of data querying from the data entry window. If you go to the data entry window and fill in a species name, for instance, if you click on the blue taxon button next to the name that you just entered, you have a couple of options at the bottom here. You can get it to show all related records for that species, and similarly we could show all related sites for the species. So this is just showing the particular site names at which that species has been recorded. There are one or two other options in here as well. You can show all the recorders who've recorded that species, all the methods that it's been assigned to, and so on. The other option here is called Info On, and this is a bit biased towards moth and butterfly recording, but it will, for instance, run queries that show you the earliest date in the year at which a species has been recorded, or the first record on your database for that particular species. Back in again and click on Taxon, Info On, and various other things. The phenology one, for instance, will show you the months in which your records have been made for any given species. So there's a whole range of things there that you can get at from the taxon button. But the same thing applies in the other fields as well. If you fill in a recorder name, for instance, and then click on the recorder label, and you can do show all related from here, so you can see all the records that that particular recorder has ever made, a species list for that recorder. So this is showing a summarized list of each separate species that recorder has a record for. And similarly, show all related sites, all the sites that the recorder has visited, all the methods that has been used for their records, etc., etc. So for many of these fields you can do something similar. If we fill in seed as a stage term, we can then have the option to click on stage and show all related records. So those are all the records that have had the stage seed applied to them. And similarly for many of the other fields in the data entry window. So that works very nicely for just looking up information on one particular thing at a time. But you can actually use more than one of the fields to filter out your data. Supposing, for instance, I wanted to look at all the records for field maple that had been made by Martin Harvey. I can't do that by clicking on the button because that only applies to the field that you've clicked next to, but what I can do is go up to the query menu, and I can ask it to look for records for all valid fields. Now what MapMate considers a valid field is a field in the data entry window that's had something typed into it and for which the enter button has been pressed so that the field has been accepted as a proper name or date or whatever it is, and that's then considered a valid field. So by running this query records for all valid fields, it will look up all the records that are for both for field maple and recorded by Martin Harvey. Similarly, if we look at this in a slightly different way, we could have a species and perhaps we want to look at all our field maple records in the year 2004. You must remember to press enter, otherwise the field isn't considered a valid field. Having filled those two in, we can do query records for all valid fields, and it just filters it out for field maple in 2004. And you could fill in several of these fields. We could have the recorder also filled in. We now have 3 valid fields, and the query will still run records for all valid fields. You'll also see there's some other options. We could do sites for all valid fields, so in this case that would produce a list of all the sites at which Martin Harvey recorded field maple in the year 2004. And another way of using that sites query is to just fill in a recorder name and a year, and do sites for all valid fields, and that's the list of all the sites at which records for that recorder were made in the year 2004. And the taxa for all valid fields would give us a list of all the species that that recorder had made in the year 2004. So you can see there's quite a lot of different ways of selecting out your data and filtering it out to match whichever fields you've completed in the data entry window. This can be a powerful and quick alternative to using the analysis part of MapMate. One thing, however, that you can't do from the data entry window is use the wildcard method for combining together similar site names or similar person names. If you watch our other video that explains how to use the wildcard system, you'll see that can be quite useful, but as I say, you can only do that in the analysis bit of MapMate. When you're in the data entry window, you can only look at one single site definition or name definition at a time. A final example of how this query menu can work. Suppose we'd been to a particular site on a particular date, and we wanted to produce a list of the species that we'd seen at that site on that date, perhaps to send off to somebody else for some feedback from a day's recording. If you fill in the site name and the date, and then go to the query menu, there's something called Quick Species Summary, which produces a list of all the species that have been recorded at that site and date in a single column, which you can highlight, copy, and then paste into an email or some other document just to provide an instant species list for the day. So there's quite a lot to explore here. You can try various combinations of different fields using the query menu or using the show all related, and sometimes the information on buttons will give you other options. So it's worth giving it a try and seeing whether that produces some useful results from your data.